March 17, 1943. The manila folder hit Admiral Wilhelm Canaris' desk so hard, the impact sent his coffee cup trembling. Dark liquid spilling across classified documents that could have gotten him shot if the Gestapo ever laid eyes on them. He stared at the papers. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Impossible," he whispered. "The Americans are planting false intelligence through double agents. This can't be real." Outside the tall windows of Abwehr headquarters, the Landwehr Canal stretched cold and grey. The same water where they'd dumped Rosa Luxemburg's corpse 24 years back. Now, Canaris, head of German military intelligence, held something in his trembling fingers that didn't just challenge Hitler's propaganda. It shattered the entire mathematical equation Germany had built its war strategy on. The intercepted reports coming out of Mexico City. The agent cables from operatives still embedded across the Americas, they all said the same unbelievable thing. Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was churning out one complete four-engine B-24 Liberator heavy bomber every single hour. Think about that for a second. The B-24 Liberator, 1.5 million individual parts, 450,000 rivets, 30,000 separate components all coming together into an 80-ton flying fortress. Rolling off an assembly line faster than Germany could build a basic military truck. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz stood rigid at attention in front of Canaris' desk. He'd triple-checked every number, verified every source, run the calculations again and again. The intelligence held up. What neither of these men understood in that moment was they were witnessing the birth of the most catastrophic intelligence failure in modern warfare. A systematic collapse where German intelligence would accurately gather the truth about American industrial might, but would never, ever be able to make Nazi leadership believe it. A failure of belief that would mathematically doom the Third Reich before the first shot of the final battles was ever fired. The breakdown had started 2 years earlier. Back in 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler had walked into Hermann Göring's office carrying reports from military attached General Friedrich von Bodecher, stationed in Washington. The numbers were clear. American aircraft production was hitting 2,000 planes per month. Göring had actually laughed out loud. He'd laughed. "Americans can build refrigerators and safety razors," he'd said, waving his hand dismissively. "But, military aircraft, please." 4 days after Pearl Harbor, December 1941, Göring had stood before Hitler at the Wolf's Lair and delivered his assessment with absolute confidence. "The Americans are bluffing, mein Führer. Their democracy makes them soft. Their mixed-race population makes them chaotic. Their Jewish influence makes them corrupt. They cannot possibly achieve what they're claiming." By March 1943, German intelligence networks sprawling across North and South America were sending back reports that violated every assumption. Nazi racial theory and economic doctrine were built on. The sources were everywhere, diverse, independent. Mexican industrialists with German sympathies, Spanish diplomats moving through neutral channels, Swedish businessmen traveling the American Midwest on trade missions. Even intercepted personal letters from American factory workers writing to relatives in neutral countries. They all reported the same impossible reality. Ford's Willow Run plant, just one single factory, was outproducing every aircraft manufacturer in Germany combined. Oberst Nicholas Ritter, running Oberst Air Intelligence Section, known as Abteilung Luft, had spent 3 straight weeks analyzing the incoming data. Ritter wasn't some desk officer who'd never seen America. He was a former Lufthansa pilot who'd lived in the United States for 10 years before the war started. His Manhattan apartment in the 1920s had overlooked the construction site of the Chrysler Building. He'd watched Americans throw up the world's tallest building in less than 2 years. He understood what American industry could do when it decided to move. Herr Admiral Ritter had reported to Canaris, his voice steady but grim. "If these production numbers are accurate, and every analytical method I have says they are, then Germany has already lost this war. It's not a question of courage or tactics anymore. It's pure mathematics and time." The intelligence was flowing through dangerous channels, each source risking everything. Georg Nikolaus, running Abwehr's primary spy network out of Mexico City, had spent years cultivating relationships with American businessmen who moved freely between Detroit's factories and Mexico's oil fields. These executives talked openly at dinner parties and trade receptions, completely unaware their casual conversations were being recorded, transcribed, and transmitted to Berlin. February 3, 1943. American oil executive Harold Morrison attended a reception at the German-Mexican Commerce Association in Mexico City. After a few rounds of tequila, Morrison started describing his recent tours of the Willow Run facility, a showcase Ford had arranged for potential investors to demonstrate their capacity for handling massive government contracts. "Gentlemen," Morrison had said, leaning forward with enthusiasm, while Wolfgang Blau, a German intelligence officer posing as an Argentine leather merchant, committed every word to memory, "what I witnessed defies any description I can give you. The assembly line runs over a mile long. The building is so enormous that weather patterns form inside it, actual clouds that sometimes produce rain under the factory roof. They've got 42,000 workers in there, thousands of them women, including Negro women. And they're building the most technically complex machine ever mass-produced." Morrison had pulled out a pencil and started sketching on a cocktail napkin. "This bomber has 2 bomb bays that can carry 4,000 pounds of ordnance each, for engines, each one generating 1,200 horsepower. Ford builds them in sections, what they call sub-assemblies, that flow together like tributaries feeding into a main river. Wing sections arrive from one direction, fuselage sections from another, tail assemblies from a third angle. Everything converges at exact points along the production line with perfect timing." Blau had asked carefully, trying to sound like a curious businessman rather than a spy. "But surely, with such mechanical complexity, there must be constant breakdowns, production stoppages, quality problems." Morrison had actually laughed at that. That's exactly what Consolidated Aircraft thought when Ford first proposed this. They mocked the whole idea, said you can't manufacture airplanes like automobiles. But Ford broke down the entire bomber into 60,000 separate individual operations. Each worker performs the same specific task over and over and over. A woman who was cooking breakfast for her kids last month is now installing hydraulic lines in tail sections. They train people in days, not months. Perhaps the most detailed intelligence came through Francisco Franco, Spain. Colonel José Hungría, Spanish military attaché posted in Washington, maintained friendly relationships with American aircraft manufacturers while secretly funneling intelligence back to Germany in exchange for tungsten shipments that were critical to Spanish industrial operations. March 1943, Hungría attended a diplomatic reception at the Argentine embassy where he met Charles Sorensen, Ford's chief of production and the mastermind architect behind Willow Run. Sorensen, thinking he was talking to a neutral nation's representative who might become a post-war customer, spoke freely about the plant's revolutionary capabilities. Colonel Sorensen had said, completely unaware that every single word would be decoded on a desk in Berlin within 2 weeks. When I first visited Consolidated San Diego plant back in 1940, they were building B-24s outdoors in the California sunshine, each aircraft slightly different from the last one, taking 180,000 man-hours per plane. I knew immediately we could do exponentially better. Hungría had pressed for technical details, claiming professional interest as a military engineer. Sorensen, clearly proud of what he'd accomplished, was happy to explain. "I spent one night in my San Diego hotel room sketching out the entire production flow on hotel stationery. We would build these bombers exactly like we build automobiles, not by having workers swarm over a stationary aircraft like bees, but by moving the aircraft past stationary workstations. Each worker would perform specific, precise tasks repeatedly, achieving absolute perfection through pure repetition." The Spanish colonel had asked about the workforce challenges of managing such complexity. "We built an apprentice school that trains 8,000 new workers every single week," Sorensen replied. "Women make up 40% of our total workforce. They're actually superior at detailed precision work. Smaller hands for tight spaces, more patience for repetitive assembly tasks. We have Negro workers operating the most sophisticated machinery in the facility. We have 16-year-old boys managing complex supply chain logistics. Democracy in action means utilizing every available human resource without prejudice. Through Swedish channels, through Argentine diplomatic pouches, through Japanese and Turkish intelligence networks, German intelligence was receiving consistent reports from completely independent sources, all confirming Willow Run's production rate. Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg visited the plant in March 1943 and filed a report stating, "The facility operates with an efficiency that defies any European frame of reference." They employ 1,600 specialized machine tools, many custom designed for single specific operations. The capital investment is staggering, perhaps $200 million just for tooling and equipment. Japanese naval attaché, Toshikazu Omei's coded message to Tokyo, which German intelligence intercepted and decoded, provided independent third-party verification. This single American factory produces more military aircraft in 1 month than our entire Japanese aviation industry produces in 3 months combined. By April 1943, German intelligence had assembled comprehensive documentation from 17 completely independent sources, all confirming the same production rate. The numbers were beyond staggering. Willow Run alone was producing 650 B-24 bombers monthly at peak capacity. Total American B-24 production across all factories was exceeding 1,400 aircraft per month. Desperate for ground truth that couldn't be dismissed as propaganda, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, the insertion of saboteurs into the United States via submarine with orders to gather production intelligence before conducting any sabotage operations. George John Dosh, leading one of the 2 foreman saboteur teams, had lived in America for 20 years before returning to Germany in 1939. His secret orders from Canaris himself were to prioritize gathering photographic evidence and documentation on aircraft production before attempting any industrial sabotage. Early morning hours of June 13, 1942, Dosh's team came ashore at Amagansett, Long Island, having been inserted from U-202 just after midnight under cover of darkness. Within days, tormented by the implications of his mission and what he already knew about American industrial capacity from his 2 decades living there, Dosh walked into an FBI office and surrendered. During his interrogation, Dosh revealed something that absolutely stunned his American captors. "Admiral Canaris personally told me that Berlin refuses to believe your production figures. The Nazi leadership thinks Willow Run is elaborate propaganda theater." Canaris wanted photographs, employee headcounts, shipping manifests, railroad records, concrete proof that would force Göring to accept reality regardless of his ideology. FBI Special Agent Charles Landman had asked incredulously, "They genuinely don't believe we're producing a heavy bomber every hour?" Dosh had laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. "Agent Landman, I lived in your country for 2 decades. I've personally toured your automobile factories in Detroit. I tried explaining to German intelligence that if Ford could produce a finished automobile every 60 seconds in peacetime, they could absolutely produce a bomber every hour during total war mobilization. They accused me of defeatist thinking and American contamination." April 20, 1943, Adolf Hitler's 54th birthday. Canaris personally traveled to Carenhall, Hermann Göring's grotesquely ostentatious hunting estate north of Berlin, to present the accumulated intelligence directly to the Reichs. This meeting would become legendary among surviving German intelligence officers for Göring's complete, absolute rejection of documented reality. Canaris had brought everything: photographs showing the mile-long assembly line, intercepted shipping manifests, agent reports from dozens of independent sources across 3 continents. He spread the evidence across Göring's massive oak table, like a card dealer showing a losing hand. Herr Reichs, Marshal Canaris began choosing every word carefully because his life might depend on them. "We have confirmation from 17 completely independent intelligence sources. Ford's Willow Run plant is producing 1 complete B-24 Liberator every hour at peak production. They've maintained this rate consistently since January of this year." Göring weighing over 280 pounds at this point in the war. His addiction to prescription medications, obvious in his dilated pupils, picked up one of the aerial photographs showing the assembly line stretching into the distance like an industrial river. Canaris Göring said, his voice dripping with contempt, "Do you take me for a complete fool? These are obviously wooden mock-ups, props constructed for propaganda photography. The Americans want us to believe they can manufacture aircraft like sausages in a butcher shop. This Willow Run plant probably produces 50 bombers monthly at absolute maximum." Canaris pulled out another document. This one, an intercepted manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad showing aluminum shipments. Herr Reichsmarschall, they are consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum monthly at this single facility. That's more than our entire national monthly aluminum production across all of Germany. Göring had laughed, a harsh barking sound. Then where exactly do they obtain this aluminum? From their Negro workers? From their women riveters? Canaris, you have been deceived by sophisticated American propaganda operations. 1 week later, Canaris received a summons to the Wolf's Lair to brief Hitler personally. The meeting included Generals Jodl and Keitel, plus Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler was studying maps of the Eastern Front, where the Wehrmacht was preparing for Operation Citadel, the massive offensive that would become the Battle of Kursk. He listened with visible impatience as Canaris presented the intelligence assessment. "Mein Führer," Canaris said, knowing he was literally risking execution with every word. "If the Americans are genuinely producing 1,400 B-24s monthly, plus equal numbers of B-17 Flying Fortresses, plus their fighter aircraft production, combined with British production, the aerial bombardment capacity against the Reich will soon exceed anything our air defenses can possibly withstand." Hitler's response was entirely characteristic. "Admiral, the Americans are certainly capable of mass production of simple consumer goods, automobiles, refrigerators, washing machines. But a heavy bomber is not a consumer product. It requires precision German engineering, skilled craftsmanship, dedication to perfection. They claim to have built this miraculous factory and achieved this production rate in 16 months. It's mathematically impossible." General Jodl studied Canaris' figures carefully and began making calculations on paper. "Mein Führer, even if we accept only 1/4 of these reported figures as potentially accurate, the figures are completely false," Hitler interrupted sharply. "The Americans entered this war in December 1941. Constructing this supposedly miraculous factory and achieving this production level in such a brief time frame is physically impossible." What Nazi leadership didn't know was that Canaris had obtained actual film footage of Willow Run in full operation through American intelligence contacts operating in Switzerland. The film, smuggled through Spanish diplomatic pouches, showed 5 minutes of continuous assembly line operations. Canaris and his deputy Hans Oster watched the footage in a locked room deep inside Abwehr headquarters, the only light coming from the projector. The camera traveled along the entire mile-long assembly line in one continuous shot. B-24s in every stage of construction moved past at steady, unrelenting pace. Workers, men and women, black and white, performed their tasks with mechanical precision. A large factory clock visible in several shots confirmed the exact timing of the production rate. "My God," Oster had whispered, in the darkness, "it's all true. Every word of it." Canaris pulled the film from the projector and held his cigarette lighter under it, watching the celluloid curl and burn. "We cannot show this to them. They would either accuse us of fabricating fake footage or worse, they would call us traitors spreading defeatist propaganda." November 1943. German intelligence obtained high-resolution aerial photographs of Willow Run taken by a Spanish diplomat flying a commercial route. Photo analysis specialists spent weeks studying every detail of the images. Their conclusions were methodical and damning. Parking lots contained approximately 12,000 automobiles, indicating 3 full-shift operations running around the clock. 47 completed B-24s were clearly visible at the adjacent airfield, staged and ready for delivery flights. The assembly line was partially visible through factory skylights. Aircraft spaced exactly as human intelligence had reported. Rail sightings showed dozens of freight cars delivering raw materials and components. Hermann Göring, the senior photo analyst, wrote in his assessment, "Photographic evidence completely confirms human intelligence reports. Production rate appears accurate within acceptable margins of error. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment of air defense requirements and diplomatic options." Göring, when shown the photographs, dismissed them as clever American photographic manipulation using scale models and trick photography. Dr. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and the only senior Nazi leader with genuine understanding of modern industrial production capacity, secretly obtained copies of the American intelligence through his own channels. His diary entry for May 15, 1943, discovered in Allied archives after the war, reveals his private despair. "If the Willow Run production figures are even 50% accurate, we face not military defeat but complete industrial annihilation. They are producing more aircraft in 1 month than we produce in an entire year. But I cannot speak this truth aloud to anyone. To voice this assessment would be signing my own death warrant." Dr. Otto, head of SD Inland and a professionally trained economist before joining the S, analyzed captured American economic data and production statistics. His confidential report to Himmler in December 1943 was mathematically stark. The Ford Motor Company's peacetime production in 1941 was 1.1 million vehicles annually. They have successfully converted this massive industrial capacity to military bomber production. At current production rates, by June 1944, the Americans will have manufactured sufficient B-24s alone to deliver our entire 1940 London Blitz bombing tonnage every single day indefinitely. Christmas Eve, 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American projected production targets for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000 aircraft. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000 aircraft. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000 aircraft. Fighter aircraft of all types, 40,000. Total projected production, 86,000 military aircraft in a single calendar year. Hitler's response when these projections were presented to him was pure denial. The Americans claim they will produce more military aircraft in 1944 than all nations in human history have produced combined since the Wright brothers' first flight. It's absolutely absurd propaganda. By February 1944, Admiral Canaris was removed from his position as head of Abwehr, suspected of defeatism, treason, and involvement with resistance elements. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a committed Nazi loyalist who would never dare contradict Hitler or Göring with uncomfortable intelligence assessments. But physical reality couldn't be ignored forever, no matter how strong the ideological denial. February 20th, 1944. Big week. The American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers in mass formations against German aircraft manufacturing facilities. In 6 consecutive days of operations, American bombers dropped more explosive tonnage on German targets than the entire Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire London Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland, commanding Germany's fighter forces, had confronted Göring directly. "Herr Reichsmarschall, I have personally counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These aircraft are absolutely real, and they are dropping very real bombs on our cities and factories." June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 11,000 Allied aircraft appeared in the skies over France. The Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 fighters in response to the largest amphibious invasion in human history. Feldmarschall Hugo Sperrel sent a desperate encrypted message back to Berlin. "The enemy's aerial superiority is complete and absolute. Our intelligence assessments were mathematically correct from the beginning. We were not deceived by the Americans. We deceived ourselves." April 1944. Willow Run achieved its maximum peak production rate. That month, 42,331 employees working to 9-hour shifts, 6 days per week, produced 453 complete aircraft in 468 production hours. That's one finished B-24 Liberator rolling off the line every 63 minutes. Sustained for an entire month. The workforce demographics would have completely shattered Nazi racial ideology. 11,000 women, representing 26% of the total workforce. 3,800 African Americans, 9% of the workforce. 1,200 workers with various physical disabilities, 3% of the workforce. The so-called inferior races and weaker elements of society were outproducing the supposed master race by orders of magnitude. After Germany's surrender, surviving German intelligence officers revealed the full scope of the catastrophic failure during Allied interrogations and war crimes tribunals. Walter Schellenberg testified at Nuremberg. We knew the complete truth about American production capacity by early 1943. Every professional intelligence officer with access to the data understood the numbers were accurate and verified. But to report this truth to Nazi leadership was to risk immediate execution for spreading defeatist propaganda. Hans Bernd Gisevius, who escaped to Switzerland and survived the war, wrote in his memoirs, "The real tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence about American industrial production. We were absolutely drowning in accurate intelligence from multiple independent sources. The tragedy was that our political and military leadership systematically refused to believe it, because accepting this intelligence would contradict their fundamental racial ideology and worldview." The German intelligence officers who tried courageously to report the truth to Nazi leadership paid the ultimate price. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, executed by slow strangulation, April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Hans Oster, executed April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Alexis von Rohen, executed October 1944 for involvement in the July 20 assassination plot against Hitler. Hans Bernd Gisevius escaped to Switzerland and survived to testify. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, conducted immediately after the war with access to all captured German records, confirmed everything German intelligence had desperately tried to report. Willow Run produced 8,685 B-24 Liberators between 1942 and 1945. Peak monthly production reached 650 complete aircraft. The 1 bomber per hour production rate was sustained continuously for months. Total cost per aircraft dropped from $38,000 to $137,000 through production efficiency improvements. Albert Speer, during extensive post-war interrogation by American intelligence officers, was asked directly why Germany refused to believe the intelligence about American production capacity. His answer was brutally honest. To accept that Ford Motor Company could produce a heavy bomber every hour was to accept that our entire ideological worldview was fundamentally wrong. That democracy wasn't weakness, but strength. That racial mixing didn't create inefficiency, but power. That women could perform men's work. That diversity wasn't corruption, but capability. It would mean accepting that we had started a war we could never mathematically win regardless of our soldiers' courage. Who among us would tell Adolf Hitler that truth and expect to survive the conversation? Roswell Monroe, the real-life woman who became the cultural icon known as Rosie the Riveter, operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line at Willow Run. She and thousands of women, exactly like her, had never worked in any industrial setting before Pearl Harbor changed everything. We knew we were building something crucially important, Monroe said in a 1984 interview decades later. Every single rivet we drove into those aluminum panels was going to help end the war and bring our boys home. We worked double shifts sometimes, sleeping in our cars in the parking lot between shifts. We had brothers, husbands, and sweethearts flying these exact planes we were building. The systematic failure to believe accurate intelligence about Willow Run had catastrophic strategic consequences. Across every aspect of German war planning, fighter production priorities, Germany continued producing bombers for offensive operations. Until late 1944, instead of shifting entirely to defensive fighters, resource allocation, scarce resources were wasted on experimental wonder weapons like the V-2 rocket instead of practical air defense systems. Strategic planning. Military operations were planned assuming they would face hundreds of enemy bombers, not thousands simultaneously. Diplomatic failures? Peace overture opportunities were delayed because Nazi leadership didn't understand they faced certain mathematical defeat. German economists analyzing captured American documents after the war realized the true scale of the industrial disparity. Willow Run construction cost $200 million for a single factory. German entire aircraft industry capital investment, 1933 to 1945, $400 million equivalent. Willow Run factory floor space, 3.5 million square feet under one roof. All German aircraft factories combined total floor space, 8 million square feet, scattered across dozens of locations vulnerable to bombing. Willow Run monthly electrical power consumption, 2.5 million kW. The Americans had constructed and operated a single factory that consumed more resources and electricity than entire German cities. The final accounting revealed the true scale of the industrial mismatch when the war ended. Total B-24 Liberators, produced by all American manufacturers. 18,188 aircraft. Willow Run's production total, 8,685 aircraft. Nearly half of all B-24s ever built. Total B-17 Flying Fortresses produced 12,731 aircraft. Total American military aircraft produced 1940 to 1945. 337,117 aircraft. Total German military aircraft produced 1940 to 1945. 94,700 aircraft. The United States produced 3.2 times more military aircraft than Germany, while simultaneously fighting a two-ocean war against both Germany and Japan. Military historians and intelligence scholars now classify the German intelligence failure regarding American production capacity as one of the most consequential intelligence failures in all of military history. It wasn't a failure of intelligence collection. German intelligence agents gathered accurate, detailed, verified intelligence from multiple independent sources. It was a catastrophic failure of acceptance. Political and military leadership systematically refusing to believe intelligence that contradicted their ideological worldview and racial theories. Dr. Gerhard Weinberg, the preeminent historian of World War II, concluded in his analysis, German intelligence services accurately assessed American industrial production capacity by early 1943. Had this intelligence been believed and acted upon by Nazi leadership, Germany might have sought negotiated peace terms 2 years earlier, potentially saving millions of military and civilian lives on all sides. This story carries profound lessons that echo far beyond World War II. Cognitive bias. Accurate intelligence can be completely rejected if it contradicts core ideological beliefs and assumptions. Ideological blindness. Political ideology can override mathematical reality until reality forcibly asserts itself. Systemic organizational failure. Intelligence systems that punish bearers of unwelcome truth will receive comfortable lies instead. Fatal strategic miscalculation. Systematically underestimating opponents' capabilities leads to catastrophic strategic errors. At the 1985 dedication ceremony of the Yankee Air Museum at the former Willow Run site, former Rosie the Riveter, Rose Will Monroe, met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans-Ulrich Rudel, who had survived the war after flying thousands of combat missions. Rudel asked her directly, "How did you build so many aircraft so fast?" Monroe's answer was characteristically American in its straightforward simplicity. "Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job. Nothing fancy or complicated about it. Punch in at the time clock, build bombers, punch out. Democracy isn't some complicated theory. It's just free people doing their best work." Rudel had responded quietly. "We were told by our leaders that democracy made you weak, that your racial diversity made you inefficient, that your system was corrupt and doomed. We were told lies, and those lies killed millions of people." In the ruins of Berlin, May 1945, American intelligence officers searching through bombed-out German government buildings discovered a final intelligence report on Willow Run production. Dated April 20, 1945. Adolf Hitler's last birthday, written just days before his suicide. The report stated, Willow Run production capacity, confirmed by all available intelligence. We reported this truth to leadership 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies, not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of wisdom. To believe intelligence that contradicts what we desperately wish to be true. Let future generations learn this lesson. Physical reality does not bend to ideological belief. Mathematics does not yield to political mythology. Truth ignored becomes tragedy, and tragedy becomes history. The report was never delivered to anyone. By then, Hitler was trapped in his bunker. The 1,000-year Reich had days left to exist. And thousands upon thousands of American bombers, many of them built at Willow Run, were delivering the final argument that German intelligence had desperately tried to make. 2 years earlier, when it might have mattered, the verdict of history is absolutely clear. German intelligence collection and analysis was professionally excellent. German intelligence acceptance by political and military leadership was catastrophically disastrous. In that organizational failure to believe uncomfortable truths lies a warning that echoes across generations for all nations and all leaders. Physical reality doesn't care what you believe. Mathematical truth doesn't negotiate with ideology. Those who systematically deny reality in favor of comforting ideology will ultimately be destroyed by that reality. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built irrefutable proof that democracy works, that diversity strengthens rather than weakens, that freedom produces results that authoritarianism cannot match. German intelligence officers counted every aircraft, verified every number, documented every truth. German political leadership believed none of it, and that willful disbelief killed the Third Reich as surely and completely as any bomb ever dropped from the sky.